The Man Between. This is the story of a novelist, Kit Carradine, who is tapped on the shoulder by MI6 and asked to do a spot of spying for them when he's attending a literary festival in Marrakesh. And the book is also an homage to Somerset Maugham's book of short stories, Ashendon. Somerset Maugham obviously was a very famous dramatist and novelist and was already very well established as a celebrity writer, if you like, during the First World War. And MI6 came along to him and said, will you do some spying for us in Switzerland when you're out there writing your new play? And so he became a spy for MI6 during World War I. And there's a history of doing this with Graham Greene and also with Frederick Forsyth. Novelists have perfect cover because we can go wherever we want, we meet interesting people, we have a reason to be there because we're taking notes and absorbing the atmosphere and finding out interesting political things. And so we could come back to London and have lunch at White's with the head of counterintelligence and download everything that we know. So the book comes from that idea.
So the $64,000 question then is, are you a spy?
I am not a spy. I never have been a spy, but I was approached for a job when I was about 25, so more than 20 years ago now, by a family friend who had recently retired from what he told me at the time was the Foreign Office. And he put me up for a job, put me up for an interview, which I went along to, and at the first interview they said, actually, this isn't just straight fast-stream diplomatic service, it's for SIS, the Secret Intelligence Service, which is the formal name for MI6. And I did various interviews and exams, and gave them a blood sample. No, I didn't do that. But I didn't get in. But I had enough of an exposure to that world and enough of a fascination with that world, and I was a young man not going anywhere particularly fast, with not a very clear idea of who I was or what I wanted to be, apart from a writer. So I had this material that had dropped into my lap, and so I wrote a version of my story, my encounter with MI6, in my first book, A Spy by Nature.
So in The Man Between, your writer, Kit Carradine, is a bit bored being a writer and he jumps at the opportunity of a bit of action. Is this by any chance how you feel?
I did have a period of my career 3-4 years ago where that didn't become a problem, but I was very conscious of that. So that has fed into Kit. He worked at the BBC in his 20s and worked in Istanbul and has had quite an interesting life, and then suddenly writes this book and it becomes a really big bestseller and is turned into a Hollywood film, and so he's then up and running as a writer, and the publisher wants more books out of him and he'd be a fool to stop. But he has not anticipated the routine, the sameness of it. So when he's tapped up, it's sort of bolt from the blue, but it's a blessing to him because he has some excitement in his life. He has a cause. He has something beyond his typewriter.
I really enjoyed the book, and I've read some of your other ones, and it seems to me that the difference with this one is that it's something of a love story.
Yes, I'm glad you feel that way. To reveal more of the plot, that Kit finds himself on the trail of a woman called Lara Bartok, who is the estranged girlfriend of a sort of Assange-esque, Snowden-esque rogue figure who's created a revolutionary movement which is taking pot shots and at members of the far right, or the alt-right, or white nationalists in America, or the Brexit crowd here, or the severe Brexit crowd here, and in Russia and Turkey and so on. And Lara has gone missing for various mysterious reasons, and Kit is tasked with finding her. And this idea of trying to do a sort of serious contemporary political thriller, an exciting page-turning spy thriller, fused with interesting characters, with a love story, as you describe it.
Check, check, check.
Check, check, check. Yes, yeah. That's always the challenge, is to do something more interesting with this genre than just excitement and bombs going off and James Bond getting the girl. Yeah.
These are real characters. You do get invested in them. I mean, it's a real page-turner, but at the same time you do care about the people.
Good.
What is quite disturbing, I find, though, is that it is contemporary, because if you're writing about the Second World War or the Cold War, then it's all safely in the past. But these are things that could be happening, maybe even are happening, and that's quite disturbing.
Yes, I've had this with my career all the way through, actually, that I've written about a particular time, a set of political circumstances. So in the Spanish game, I was writing about ETA. I was living in Madrid, and the Atocha bombings happened while I was at my desk writing the Spanish game, which was about the Basque separatist organisation ETA. And originally, the Atocha bombings were blamed on ETA, and then with Typhoon, which is a story about Uyghur Muslim activists, disenfranchised kind of Turkic Muslims in northwest China, kicking back against the Chinese Politburo, against the Communist Party, and so forth. Literally, the day that novel was published, that very thing started to happen in Xinjiang, in Urumqi, and so forth. So you're always at risk, especially in the present day with Trump, and this book is really very much about the age of Trump, that he could be impeached tomorrow or assassinated or do something even more. It was hard to imagine how much worse he could get, but something even more despicable, and the book would be either out of date or is focused on the wrong thing. So yeah, it is a risk writing about the contemporary scene. In fact, I'm thinking quite seriously in my next book of going back 20, 25 years, partly for this reason that I'm describing, also because technology has so changed the landscape of espionage, the way that real-life intelligence officers operate, the way that the people that they are chasing operate, and therefore, as a result, people like me who write about them, the effect of, let's say, the mobile phone or the satellite in the sky has had an effect on storytelling.
The morality has also changed, or at least perhaps it hasn't, but it feels that way, because your character, Kit, says that in the old days, it was quite clear that British Secret Service was on the side of the angels, but now it's less clear.
That is certainly, yeah, in the post-Iraq world, the post-dodgy dossier world, I think MI6 does have an image problem, no question about it.
But when you have things like extraordinary rendition happening, there's no going back from that, is there?
Yeah, and I've sort of tackled this in my Kell trilogy, the idea that the British intelligence is so umbilically linked with the Americans that, especially in the post 9/11, immediate post 9/11 era, the Americans were very angry, they were humiliated, they were vengeful, and they were going after some people using means and methods that wouldn't necessarily accord with the way that we would do things. But and do we go along with that because they're our allies and we are trying to support them in this agonizing time for their country, or do we say no, enough? And too often, I think we didn't do that. I think also it's important to say that the image problem that MI5 and MI6 may or may not have is linked to the fact that they can't talk and don't talk about their many successes. So if something goes wrong, i.e. a bomb goes off somewhere in London today, they get the blame. But there's many things that you and I just simply don't hear about, because if we did, it would blow the agent who revealed that piece of intelligence that saved lives. So it's a difficult kind of balancing act.
It's a really good book, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.